After that last round of hammering, the panel drapes better throughout the middle of the panel, but I still have some gaps over here on the sides. Probably the fastest way, well, my options are I could continue stretching more throughout the entire middle and therefore leave the edges behind, or I could shrink these sides a little bit more, and that's going to cinch this up. I like to think of this as a drawstring, that if you could pull a drawstring tight along this edge, this would all pull down snug against that against the model there. So I think shrinking right here would really move this along. I've got a wrinkle forming at the front, which is telling me I have extra material here. When I put my finger up under there, I can feel the buck, or the model I should say, fits pretty close to the metal up to here. So when I shrink, I'm gonna only come in about this far to gather up that extra material there. A technique I've used with success in the past when working on a piece of sheet metal and using an original panel as the guide is I'll spray some Dykem machinist blue on the back side of the panel that I'm working on, and then when I put my panel on top of the original, I can rub the panel back and forth and scratches will show up where the panel interferes, and that tells you where you need to work the panel you're making. So here I tried that with some Magnum Sharpie, and it really didn't show up that well. It was kind of hard to discern what I was seeing there, and so I'm going to try the Dykem technique, and I'll just rub this back and forth on here. And my plan is where the Dykem shows scratches, those will be areas that need to be raised in the sheet metal. So for example, right here I've got these little bruises in the die. Also I've got some more right along in here where the Dykem is scratched off from the panel interfering on the model. So those are the areas that I will raise with a hammer in the sandbag or shot bag, and then I'll check it again. I've hammered the areas on the back that showed up as bright areas with the Dykem being scratched away, and when I place the panel on my model, it seems to fit pretty evenly overall. There aren't any real obvious hang-ups. It's just really bumpy, and so to really zoom in on the fit some more, I need to smooth it out. I think I will hit it on a steel dolly with probably start out with a wood mallet and take care of the smoothing out the largest bumps, and then I'll be able to get a better feel for how the fit is on the model. So at this phase I have a bumpy panel that seems to fit okay, and I just need to get it smoother, and then I'll be able to better assess how well it fits and decide if I need to stretch or shrink anything. The tools that I'll use for the next phase are a homemade steel, technically the term for this would be a stake, but you could think of it as a dolly. It's just a metal surface that I'm going to hammer against. This one is made out of a big pipe cap that I cut into sections and then welded a piece of square tubing on the bottom. I shaped the bottom end to a taper. I can give more detail on that later, But the benefit of the taper is that it's really fast to install the tool and remove the tool, and yet it's completely solid, whereas with things that are held in a vise, it seems like they always get loose, they tend to move a little bit, and they're just frustrating to use. It'll certainly work if you have no other way to do it, but the taper is a really excellent solution to getting a tool stabilized. So I'll be using that tool to smooth out the piece, and then a hunk of steel, similar mounting idea with a taper. This is just a flat surface to hammer against from the back side of the panel. I could also use an automotive dolly turned over, maybe on top of the sandbag or shot bag to keep it stabilized. The hammer that my first choice will be the wood mallet for this phase. I like the ability of the wood mallet to trade out highs for lows. You can get a really nice or reasonably nice finish for a hammer, a nice finish on a surface without leaving any marks. So it's good at this early phase of shaping to get the panel looking better. If I had no other options, I could also use another kind of hammer. If all I had was a ball peen hammer, that would also work. You would use the flat side. I wouldn't use the ball peen hammer that has been modified. I mentioned that was a good tool for hitting into the sandbag or shot bag with this big round face on there. That would not be a good option because the metal is going to want to dent and follow that curvature. But if I had a ball peen hammer with a flat face on it, that would be an acceptable choice for smoothing out this workpiece at this phase. Another option would be a body hammer, auto body hammer with a preferably large, flat-ish face. Flat faces work better on the outside of curved panels than a curved hammer face. You have a larger contact area, and so that would be the better choice, flat versus a really curved face. Just to give an example of the work that this accomplishes, I've got the front of the panel here. It's bumpy. The shape of this pipe cap has this really nice soft radius on it that I think is going to fit really well in this area, and I'm going to use that the flat side of the wood mallet to smooth that out. And I would consider this neither stretching nor shrinking. You're just sort of finding an equilibrium between your highs and your lows so that you get a new overall average that looks a lot more even. the large, less crowned area of the panel, some options would be either the flat homemade stake that goes in the side of my stump here, or just simply a 2x6. That's always a great option. These are nothing exotic, pretty easy to find there. And again, I'm going to go with my, I like the wood mallet just because the tool face is really big. It's being wood, it's not likely to create any more damage, and I'm just trying to even out those walnuts that are in this flatter area of the panel. At this point, it doesn't matter if I'm hitting on the exterior of the panel or the inside of the panel, as long as my hammer is hitting flush, I'm making good contact, and I'm just smoothing out this surface. So at this point, anything goes as long as I'm not adding new shape or putting dents in the panel. One thing I don't want to forget to mention is in the course of your hammering, it's conceivable that you might hammer something too much. You might end up with a bulge that you don't want, and you want that to go away. An easy way to take care of that on aluminum is to simply anneal the spot where the stretched metal is. I'm just going to color on that with a Sharpie. When I burn that Sharpie off, I'm going to use a welding tip like this, not a rosebud tip. And once I burn that Sharpie off, the metal that was the bulge will be very soft, and then I'm going to hammer it against this stake here. Doesn't really matter what the surface is as long as it's a little bit flatter than the bump that you're trying to remove. What we're doing is we're making this area soft in comparison to the metal around it, and so when we hammer that down, the easiest choice for the metal to make is to simply upset into itself, get shorter and thicker, and the bump will magically disappear. My favorite choice will be the wood mallet like this. I'll be using the flat side of the hammer, but I could just as easily use the flat ball peen hammer or a flat body hammer. I just want to be careful not to overdo it and stretch it back out.